welcome to the community meetup. On these meetups, in these activities, hope you've had the opportunity to go through the prep work and think about all the different ways that, in terms of expectations around communities, different communities, and what it means to be a member of a community. You might have discussed that in your program teams around communities. There's lots of other community events. Hopefully you've had an opportunity to join some communities, try out some things in Block Zero. So hopefully now you've had a good first week. You're starting the second week. It's already the Tuesday if you're following this in the time in which you're doing this. And today we're going to focus on your community, this group, this meetup team. And there's three activities that we're doing in this meetup. One is to try and think about what you care about, what the values are important to you, and have a discussion what the values are important to you in terms of your team. The second activity is trying to think about how you want to behave, the expectations of behaviour within your team. And so one of the things about being a member of a community is doing the right thing towards that community. What are our expectations? And often we don't always talk about these explicitly, but we have an implicit knowledge of people breaching those. When it works well, we know what that looks like, and when people do something wrong, we know what that looks like, but we don't always explicitly say it. So sometimes it's important to start being explicit about this. What are our expectations of the sorts of behaviour in this team? And the last activity is to try and think about, what does it look like if we're working well? What does success look like to us? What does this team look like when it's really successful? And there's a whole host of different ways we can think about success. So in the last activity, we want to try and think about that. And one of the other things in all of these meetups is to try perhaps a different way of working in teams, different sorts of things you can try out. So there's a few things we're trying out in this week, this session, this meetup session is to try and think about working together apart. So doing a bit of activity whilst we're all on teams together, but perhaps working on it independently. So we might be sharing on the screen at the same time, but not necessarily chatting, working on some activities, and like you would around a table. So if you're working in a physical space, you might all work around a table and say, let's just get on with this, and then you might come back and say, I'm really struggling with this part. Does anybody got any ideas of what we might do with that? So we're going to try and practice some of those working together but apart type activities in a virtual space. See how that goes, reflect on it. Might work for you, might work for some of you, might not work for all of you. And you can use that if you want to in later stages. We also, in terms of using Teams, we're going to try out OneNote as something to do in this activity. And we're going to, so those three activities build on each other. So what do we value in terms of our values of our teams? What are our norms or expectations of behaviour? What's success? Those collectively become a bit of a charter for our team. This is what's important. And one of the things, if you've watched the Successful Teams video or any of those early on the main page around teams, around meetups, is to try and think about what makes a successful team. And one of the things that makes a successful team is that they're explicit about the purpose and the values that they have, and they become the guiding principles for the team. So it's not about a boss or a leader who tells people what to do. People know what to do because they're driven by the values or the principles of that team. And trying to make those things explicit, those rules explicit, and the guidance explicit, not in terms of rules of punishment, but things that are actively people want to do, these things that people think are important. So that's what we want to try and get you to play around with, is these ideas of what's important to us and what do we want people to act like in this little community. There's all different communities that I belong to. This community, this little team, what does that look like for us? Not for all teams, just for us. What does success look like for us? You can make it up. It's your team, your rules. So why not have an opportunity to try and play around with them? And so the last thing we want to do is kind of a bit of academic thinking around this. So the sort of skill that we want to try and think about here is making something abstract, like a value, and turn that into something concrete, like a meaningful, concrete behaviour or statement that you can say, yeah, that's what that looks like. And so I'd know when people are, they're enacting those values, and I kind of know the thing that people do when they're not. And that's also useful for me as a member of this community to know that these are the sorts of things that we expect. And so I know if I don't do that, I'm breaching the kind of shared sense of expectations that we've all had a conversation about. So it's about having a chat, it's trying some different ways out of working. of working is trying OneNote in Microsoft Teams. So we're doing this meetup with all sorts of different things. Have a play around with them. I hope they're useful. And I hope that you think about your community. And as we said in the last one, I'm standing here holding a pencil. These are always written in pencil, and what that means is they can be rubbed out. You know, we make them up, we can change them. It doesn't mean you should just breach them because they're important. You've all decided to agree on these things. But at some stage, if you want to say, actually, are these working for us? Well, cross it out. Put something else. Start a different, this actually has become more important. We can do that. Rules are there to have a discussion about and to say, do we agree on this is a good thing for us to do? Okay. As always, with these meetups, good luck with trying out the activities. Good luck with the different things that we're doing in this activity. Good, and reflect on them. Try to think about them. Talk about this didn't work for me. This did work for me. And listen to other people in your group. I hope you have some good learning out of it. Practice some things that mean that when you come to start your courses in a couple of weeks' time, few weeks' time, whatever it is for you, then you've practiced some skills and you know some different ways of working. So you get some good learning out of that.